since like nearly all you guys had some geospatial technologies experience already, so some of those things you might have seen in your lectures, or some of them you might have already experienced in your professional life. So I'll just try to go through it as quickly as possible, so we can get onto the exercises. Okay. So as Eric had actually already covered some of the topics that I want to talk about, what are the use of geospatial technologies? Like three main components that would be associated with what we would try to achieve in the space challenge, and probably in general like geographical analysis. And just some short history of those things. Right. Oh. Yeah, this is supposed to be animated, but I got it into a PDF just for compatibility, so yeah. Sorry about that. The John Snow's cholera map is probably one of the first real spatial analysis that one had to perform. It's back in the 1950s. So sorry about the slides, but if you search up for this name here, John Snow, like not the Game of Thrones one, but with an H, right? With an H.
Must be hard to find.
Yeah, yeah. You would see that back then there was a cholera outbreak in London, and people were not able to work out why. So John actually took the data of each of the people who contracted cholera and then put them onto a map. And then finally, he worked out that the cholera was actually originated from, let's cover now, a well in one of the districts in London. So back then people were a bit superstitious, and they considered that cholera outbreak is actually from something called bad air. Like the bad air is spreading through London, everybody is going to be contracted. But John actually found out the reason why it was started at the first place. It's because people were drinking from this well here. So if you search up for his name and his map, you would see that he tried to plot all those points on a map of London to work out where it came from. So this is one of the first modern usage of geospatial technology before computer. So nowadays, of course, we have far more tools, as Eric had already mentioned. We are using these kind of technology for various things. Mapping, like you can see them, Google Map, like topographical maps. We use them to map our natural resources, or actually the decline of natural resources on Earth. Okay? You've already seen those. Military intelligence, something that has been used quite a lot. Disaster management. So recently, Tonga, I think, was hit by the cyclone Gita, and us at work have been spent a lot of time doing modeling on where we should be going to help those people in Tonga. And we do it by looking at satellite images, aerial photos taken by our aircraft, and also a lot of base data that we had already before. Tourism, okay, same thing as mapping and natural resources. We just tell tourists where would be interesting. Okay. Transportation modeling. Even if you look at well, we don't have subways here, but if you look at a subway map, that's a kind of geospatial technology as well. It abbreviates space into a very, very simple cartographic product that you could conceptualize in your brain. Crime, which we have an expert here. Okay. Public health, as I just mentioned, John Snow, back in the days, he used it for looking at public health problems. Business economics, well, companies like BNZ, they actually have a whole section of people who use geospatial technologies to look at demographies in a city, where wealth is distributed, or how they want it to be distributed. And of course, government as well, using demographic data and all other data. Okay. So there are lots of usages for our geospatial technologies. Okay. So the main three technologies that we look at, the first one, the free, well, this kind of a abbreviation, the 3S. Okay. I think this abbreviation is particularly used in China as well. GIS, Geographic Information System Science Studies, Remote Sensing, and Global Positioning System. Right? So the first one, Geographic Information System, it was first used by Dr. Roger Tomlinson in a paper back in the 60s. But the name had stuck. But GIS since then had acquired a lot of meanings, including GI science and GI studies, where we actually examine what can be done with GIS rather than just using it as a tool. So that's probably something that you guys are learning in School of Environment, hopefully, right? Okay. So QGIS is just part of the geographical information science realm. So we have other things like ArcGIS that you guys have used. There are other tools like Earth's Imagine, which is a remote sensing tool. So all those tools combined together, and the ways of using it, and how, and the theories that are associated with how you use the those technologies, come under geographical information science. So it's not just a system. It's not just a piece of software. So, well, the origin of GIS is same as a lot of like high-tech stuff that we know already. They come from military research. Okay. So at the beginning, it's called computer-assisted cartography. So as you would know, that it's about mapping in the beginning, mapping of topographical data, mapping of military movements, things like that. You've probably seen that in the movies, like where they have like big map, lots of like generals around a table. Okay, oh, those enemies are invading and whatnot. Okay. So there's some kind of truth in those scenes, but we've moved on since then. Okay. So yeah, so GIS has been deployed, or the predecessor of GIS has been deployed since the late 50s. So it's been a while. Right. So this is how it used to look like, the first GIS. Yeah, so it does resemble some of the scenes that you've seen on movies. Okay, so the civilian usage, it kind of began in Canada by the guy who coined the term GIS, Dr. Roger Tomlinson, and it was a simple tool, well, simple by today's standard, but it was very complicated before that, to capture topographical entities like mountains, lakes, rivers, trees, and then try to do simple overlay analysis, like looking at the distance between things, between trees and forests and lakes, forests and water sources, things like that. So that's how it all began in the civilian sector of GIS. Okay. So it doesn't come out too well, but you can see that this guy, looking guy, but that's
you can put it in the,
he's actually digitizing paper maps using what we call a digitizer. So even when I studied GIS back in, actually not long ago, about 15 years ago, we still had that in the School of Environment, where we laid a chart or a map on a table, and then we grab a digital pen and try to digitize every single feature on the map. Okay, we don't do that anymore, but that's how it used to be done. And then you can get a product out of it, so you can actually print maps out from that system. So that's how it all began. It's the origin. So the second S of the 3S, remote sensing. Okay, so it's about the usage of aerial sensors to capture the situation or the environment on the ground, okay, or about the clouds as well, atmospheric condition. So yeah, so the data is also well, usually comes in a photogrammetric image. So it's captured by a image sensor. It can be hyperspectral, but it's always an image sensor nowadays. Okay. Now we also have LiDAR data sets as well. You've probably played around with that if you are into clouds. Yeah. So there are various kinds of sensors that you can actually use now to capture remote sensing data. Okay. So again, heavily hyped to the military usage at the beginning. Okay. The modern remote sensing with all those cameras and things began about 60s with spy aircraft and spy satellites. Okay. So eventually everything becomes digital, just like we don't use those digitization pen anymore. Okay. So now it's fairly advanced. So how did it begin? It actually, from my research anyway, it began actually in the 18th century. So there were like in the in various battles back then, they would use balloons. They actually send people up there to look at what's happening in the front line, to just work out, oh, where should we advance next? And our line is breaking on the west, we should send people to the east, something like that. Okay. And then the first aerial photograph was by a guy called, I don't actually know how to pronounce his name, if you could help, it's like French. Yes. Ah, yeah. From the French company, yes. Thank you. So in the 19th century, he was the first guy to take a camera into the air and capture something. So that's somewhere in Paris, I think. Well, yeah, it was actually probably fairly advanced back then. So he has a film camera. Can't be a digital camera. So. Yeah, but then he was mainly using it for artistic purposes rather than actual analytical purposes. But that's how it began. Okay. Well, since then we've moved along quite quickly. So I think it's 1950s, 60s. We already have really advanced spy planes that would go over to anywhere that you couldn't go before and capture images of an area really high up in the sky, and then eventually we work ourselves also into space. Okay, so that's also military technology. Okay. So yeah, just like some fun facts. So back then, those spy satellites, they had film cameras. They actually put film cameras into space instead of digital. So how do they actually get those film back? Okay, so you can't see from here, but there are little small re-entry capsules just below this tube here, and then they would send it back to Earth. And then there's a little parachute coming down, and then the plane here would actually grab it in mid-air. You can actually see a video of that in YouTube. So the parachute coming down with the films, and then the plane would come through and then grab it in mid-air. So that's how it used to be done. Well, we have
eventually the Soviets tried to grab them also, so they had.
Yeah. So so let's see who get there beforehand. Yeah, well, yeah. So well, we don't do that anymore, but that's fun. Okay. All right. Okay. So get to the third thing, the global positioning system. That's far more recent than the other two technologies. Okay. So it provides like real-time location and location information in three-dimensional format, okay, for nearly any time on Earth. Sometimes you do get a not as good reception from those GPS satellites, but usually you could. So now it's quite indispensable for mobile mapping. So if you have used Google Map on your phone before and try to find where you are and how to navigate through certain places, and you've been using GPS, or maybe in your car. Okay. So the first global positioning system, or actually not global positioning system, but it's called Transit. The reason that it wasn't global is that I think it was mainly focused on for the North Atlantic and also parts of Pacific. So it was used by nuclear submarines to navigate through those areas. It wasn't for public use. So again, military usage at the beginning. So now GPS, the system that we're using now, was actually first deployed in 1978. And since then it has been demilitarized, and we can use it as well. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Okay. So unlike the GIS and remote sensing, global positioning system started entirely in digital format from the beginning due to technology. So those are just images of what the previous systems are like. Yeah, I think we have more than 32 satellites by now. I think I have to update this slide pretty soon. So yeah. So how do we get to use all those technology if they're all military oriented? So, well, as I said, they're all kind of demilitarized now with a combination of efforts between the public and military, and I'm saying public and the government, let's say, not military. Okay. And also with the improvement of technologies, it's far easier to develop those things in the public, in the industry, rather than the government or the military trying to compartmentalize something in their own house. They have far more capital in terms of money, in terms of people power in the public than in the government. So yeah, remote sensing as well. Probably something that Eric might be able to enlighten me about. There's the Landsat program, which you guys would already play with the data before in your courses. So there was a Land Remote Sensing Policy Act by the Congress in 1992 to ensure that some form of remote sensing data will be available to the public anytime for research and for other public usages. And eventually, the internet had allowed those data to distribute a lot more easily than before. I still remember the time where I actually had to email NASA to get Landsat images like in physical format, and then we scan them after we got them. Yes. So we don't do that anymore. You can download it like within 5 minutes. Global positioning system, it was for the military as well. So why did something so important to the military be demilitarized? So I'm not sure if you guys would know, there was a plane, the Korean Airlines flight 007, like not James Bond, but 007, that it was flying over an area that was in debate, and the Soviets, back then the Soviets, that's Russia, said that the plane actually went over to the border of Soviet area, and that they did not respond to any radio contact, so they shut them down with 300 people in order. So the Korean Airlines and other people would say that, no, we didn't go over the border. We were in open space. So to avoid that, they've demilitarized GPS system, so we would know exactly where the planes are when they're flying. Well, most of the time, apart from that one that we still couldn't find, MH370. Yes. So, as I said, the modern usage of geospatial technology is really just about one of those 3 S components that I talked about. It's GIS, remote sensing, and global positioning system, GPS. They always kind of like nearly always together. You can't actually work on one without dealing with the others. And yeah, there's always interactions between the 3 in terms of usage. If you want to perform spatial analysis, you will need to use GIS as a platform, but you need data from remote sensing. If you want to visualize something like yourself on Google Maps, you need geographical information system as a platform as well. And then use GPS for your location or location of the others. So there are lots of interaction between the 3. So nowadays, geospatial technology is becoming quite transparent. Like, I mean, in the public, say, I don't know, maybe our parents, would they call like Google Map a geospatial technology? Do they actually know what geospatial technology is? They don't, but they're actually using it every single day. So it's becoming really transparent. It's becoming consumer-oriented, but there's always some kind of research components in it. So where geospatial technology could bring us next, it depends on research rather than just using it as a consumer. that's the end of my little presentation. So just a review, like we went through some of the main components of geospatial technology, their origins, and how they actually interact together. I think that's it. Thank you. Have you guys already gone through those?